Does the shape of your ear matter? Well, this comes from Clark in Tokyo, Japan, one of my favorite countries to visit. Clark writes, I've been going to audio shows that we have every year here in Tokyo for the past few years. There are a lot of popular audio critics that give out lectures and talks about audio, which I find very informative and interesting. I don't recall this particular critic's name, but there was something very interesting that he mentioned that I wanted to hear your thoughts on. This is what he said. You know how oftentimes we see a profile picture of the audio critic on magazines and web ratings and how good the speaker sounds? Make sure to look at the shape of the reviewer's ear. Well, the critic has this up. If his ear is shaped like yours, you are more likely to agree with his taste in sound. This really struck me, since it's true that it's very different to describe in words how good a speaker sounds, especially with all of our different performances and how sound travels through our ears. I wanted to hear your thoughts on this, and I was wondering if you have any tips or things you could look out for when you read or hear about how a speaker sounds without hearing it for yourself. Thanks, and let us know when you come to visit Japan again. Well, I surely will. This is a very interesting question. I mean, if my ear was shaped like this, that is a big shape. Okay, I'm not by any means an expert at this, but here's my take for what it's worth. I don't think it matters. I would have to argue, hopefully over a glass of sake or something, that the reviewer is making an assumption that is not accurate, because our I believe this is called the pinna. I mean, our shape of our ears everyone's different. You could probably identify people by the shape of their ear. I mean, you know, we do it with fingerprints. We do it with, the irises. I'll bet every ear is so different that you could use that as an identifier. And I know in facial recognition that this is a big part of how they, your facial structure and your ears and all that. So if that were actually true, then people who liked infinity loudspeakers would all have similarly shaped ears? I don't think so. First off, and I've said this before, we hear with our brains. Our ears collect data and take in the sound waves, and then it's processed through all the stuff inside of our ears, and the nerve endings send up signals to our brain, which makes sense of it. Which is why, regardless of how your ear is shaped, or regardless of just about anything, you can tell my voice from somebody else's voice. And it doesn't matter what shape your ears are. There could be 100 people in this room right now. There aren't, but there could be. And with their eyes closed, and if they knew me, they would recognize my voice, even though every ear in the room is shaped differently. Secondly, I could take you into the IRS room and give you a review of what I think you'll likely hear, and I'll bet, regardless of the shape of your ear, that you'll hear very similar things to what I hear. The great imaging, the depth. I mean, when I go into the IRS room, I explain to people, here's what you're going to find that is something unusual that people don't normally understand. You see these giant tall columns standing in front of you, and you're sitting there kind of in awe. And you know intellectually that the sound is coming from those giant monoliths. Yet, when you hear the sound, there isn't any sound coming from them. In fact, all the sound is captured in a soundstage behind the loudspeakers. And your brain's trying to make sense of this, because that doesn't calculate, right? But we all hear the same thing. I have never found anybody that didn't, hear exactly that, and regardless of the shape of their ear or anything else. So I'm going to have to say that I'm going to go ahead and disagree with that reviewer. Having said that, the second part of your question is there a way to describe the sound of speakers that could be used in a way that helps us determine whether or not we want to buy a pair of speakers or not. That's a question that needs a lot more thought. I have been pondering this question for a good long time because, we're going to get into building speakers. We already are building speakers, but we're not selling them yet. We're designing them at this point. And one of the problems we have, because we sell direct and through dealers, is if a guy is in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, and there is no dealer around, and he's interested in buying our speakers, how does he simply use our words to know if they're going to match his tastes? And it's a really good question. Now, obviously, we can send the pair out, and he can hook them up and see if he does. Or he can trust us because he's heard our other stuff before. But at the end of the day, it's a real interesting problem. I mean, some of the ideas I have are to record voice and to record simple things and then try and describe it as best I can of how it sounds through our speaker system, and then have you play that back on your speaker system and see how close those cues are. For example, if I had a trio of people, and on our speakers, the soundstage was behind the speakers. It was lifelike when we hit the certain volume level. The bass went very deep. There were a couple of notes that we can play that we would even play on the recording. And maybe the narrator says, "All right, can you hear that? This should be very even. Boom, 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 boom." And if on your system you hear boom, 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 and I've done this before on a great track of music, where Boss Skaggs, thanks to you, there's a piano, an electric synth or whatever is in there, and it goes down the scale, and 90% of the sound systems out there can't reproduce that last note. It just falls off like it's not there. You listen to it on our speakers, boom, it's there, big. So you could do things like that and show, does your speaker have that? How does it image? Does this person should sound big? It should be a lot of chest to it, or it should sound, whatever, or So I could describe what we hear, and you play it on your system and see if you hear it. And if you don't, well, maybe that's a way. I don't know. I really, really stress over this question, and I got to get the old brain thinking on it. But I'm working on it. So, all right. Anyway, thanks for the question. I hope I answered it reasonably well, and I will talk to you tomorrow. Bye.